The war medals lay in their velvet-lined box at the bottom of Yates Thornfield's trunk, and in the 3 years since he had returned to his father's farm, he had not opened it once. The morning Griska arrived at his door, Yates was in the barn mucking out stalls, his shirt already soaked through despite the autumn chill. He heard the commotion before he saw her, his hound, Copper, barking frantically from the yard. Yates dropped his pitchfork and moved to the barn door, one hand instinctively reaching for the knife at his belt. Old habits died hard. What he saw made him freeze. An orc woman stood in his yard, and she was holding Copper by the scruff of his neck with one hand while the dog twisted and snarled. Her other hand was raised, palm out, in a gesture of peace. She was tall, easily matching Yates's own 6 feet, with broad shoulders and muscular arms visible beneath the torn sleeves of what had once been a leather jerkin. Her skin was a deep forest green, and 2 small tusks curved up from her lower jaw. Blood trickled from a wound on her temple, and her left leg buckled slightly as she tried to keep her balance. "I mean no harm," she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the obvious pain she was in. "I need help." Yates should have grabbed his bow. Every instinct from his years as a soldier told him to arm himself, to call for the neighbors to drive this orc away from his land. Orcs meant trouble. They raided farms, killed livestock, burned villages. The war he had fought had been against orc clans from the northern wastes, but this orc woman was alone, injured, and she had not hurt his dog despite the animal's aggression. "Copper, heel," Yates commanded. The hound immediately stopped struggling and trotted back to Yates's side, though it continued to growl low in its throat. The orc woman lowered her hand slowly, and Yates could see now that she had more injuries than just the head wound. Her clothing was torn in several places, revealing cuts and bruises on her arms and torso. One of her boots was missing, and her bare foot was caked with dried blood. "What happened to you?" Yates asked, keeping his distance. "Bounty hunters," she said. "I was traveling south to find work. They ambushed me 2 days ago, thought they could sell me to the fighting pits in Redstone." She swayed slightly, and Yates found himself taking a step forward before he caught himself. "I escaped, but I have been running since. I saw your farm and thought perhaps you might spare some water before I move on." Yates studied her face. She met his eyes directly, which he had learned during the war was unusual for orcs. Most of them had a complicated social hierarchy about eye contact. Her features were strong, with high cheekbones and a broad nose. There was pride in the set of her jaw despite her obvious exhaustion. "You are hurt," Yates said. "I will survive," she replied. "I just need water." Yates made a decision that he knew his neighbors would call him a fool for making. "The well is around back, but that head wound needs tending. Come inside." The orc woman blinked at him, clearly surprised. "You would let me into your home. You need help," Yates said simply. He turned and walked toward the farmhouse, not looking back to see if she followed. After a moment, he heard the uneven sound of her footsteps behind him. Inside, Yates gestured for her to sit at the kitchen table while he pumped water into a basin and gathered clean cloths. When he turned back, she was still standing, looking around the modest kitchen with an expression he could not quite read. "Sit," he said. "Please." She lowered herself carefully into the chair, wincing as the movement pulled at her injuries. Up close, Yates could see that she was younger than he had first thought, probably around his own age of 26 or 27. Her dark hair was braided back from her face in an intricate pattern that was now coming undone, with loose strands falling around her pointed ears. Yates dampened a cloth and moved closer. "This might sting." "I am accustomed to pain," she said, but she flinched slightly when he pressed the cloth to her temple. They were silent as he cleaned the wound. It was not as deep as he had feared. Head wounds always bled more than they should. As he worked, he became aware of how still she was sitting, how carefully she was controlling her breathing. She was afraid of him, he realized. She was in a human's home, injured and alone, and for all her proud bearing, she had to be terrified. "What is your name?" Yates asked quietly. "Griska," she said. "Griska of the Stonefist clan, or I was. I left them 6 months ago. I am Yates, Yates Thornfield." He rinsed the cloth and began cleaning the cuts on her arm. "Why did you leave your clan?" Griska was quiet for a long moment. "I did not wish to be a warrior anymore. My clan did not understand. They said I was weak, that I dishonored them, so I left to find a different path." Yates understood that more than she knew. "I was a soldier," he said. "Fought in the border wars for 5 years. Came home 3 years ago and have not left this farm since." Griska looked at him with new interest. "You fought against orc clans." "I did. There was no point in lying about it. Mostly along the northern frontier. We lost a lot of good men." He met her eyes. "I imagine your people lost a lot too." "My brother," Griska said quietly, "and my father." That is when I began to question whether the constant fighting was worth it. They fell silent again as Yates finished tending her wounds. When he was done, he fetched bread and cheese from the pantry, along with some dried meat. Griska ate ravenously, and Yates refilled her water cup twice before she finally slowed down. "You should rest," Yates said. "There is a cot in the back room. It is not much, but it is clean and dry." Griska shook her head. "I have imposed enough. I will be on my way." "You can barely walk," Yates pointed out. "Those bounty hunters might still be looking for you. Stay at least until your leg heals enough to travel properly." "Why are you helping me?" Griska asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice. "Your people and mine have been enemies for generations. I could be lying about everything. I could kill you in your sleep." Yates considered his answer carefully. "During the war, I was injured in a skirmish, took an arrow to the shoulder and got separated from my unit. I thought I was going to die out there. An orc scout found me. She could have killed me easily. I was half-conscious and unarmed. Instead, she pulled the arrow out, bandaged the wound, and left me water before disappearing back into the forest. Never saw her face, never knew her name. But she saved my life." He stood and began putting away the medical supplies. "Maybe I have been waiting for a chance to repay that debt." Griska stared at him for a long moment, and Yates thought he saw her eyes growing suspiciously bright. But she blinked and looked away, her voice gruff when she spoke. "I will stay for a few days, until I can walk properly, and I will work to earn my keep. I will not be a burden." "You are injured. I will work," Griska said firmly. "It is the orc way. We do not accept charity." Yates nodded slowly. "All right, we will figure out what you can manage, but for now rest, please." This time Griska allowed him to show her to the back room. It was small and sparsely furnished, but the cot had clean blankets and the window looked out over the fields. Griska sat down heavily, and Yates could see the exhaustion washing over her now that the immediate danger had passed. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I will not forget this kindness. Yates Thornfield." Yates nodded and left her to rest, closing the door behind him. As he returned to the kitchen, he caught sight of his reflection in the window and wondered what in all the hells he had just done. Harboring an orc on his farm was asking for trouble. If the neighbors found out, they would call for the militia. If those bounty hunters came looking, there would be violence. But when he closed his eyes, he saw that orc scout from years ago, her face still hidden in his memory, but her actions clear. She had shown him mercy when she had no reason to. How could he do any less? Over the next few days, an uneasy routine developed. Griska slept most of the first day, her body desperately needing the rest. When she emerged the next morning, she immediately began looking for tasks to occupy herself. Yates protested, but Griska was as stubborn as she was proud. She could not do heavy labor with her injured leg, but she could mend fences while sitting, could shell peas and beans for winter storage, could card wool from Yates's small flock of sheep. Yates found himself adjusting to her presence more easily than he had expected. She was quiet but not sullen, and when she did speak, her observations were often wryly humorous. She had a practical, no-nonsense approach to work that reminded Yates of his mother, who had passed 5 years ago. His father had followed her within a year, leaving Yates the farm and the quiet life he had desperately wanted after the war. On the third day, Yates came in from the fields to find Griska standing in the doorway of his bedroom, her posture rigid. "I am sorry," she said quickly when she saw him. "I was looking for more thread for the mending and I opened the wrong door. I did not mean to intrude." "It is all right," Yates said, though he felt a flicker of unease. What had she seen? Griska hesitated, then turned to face him fully. "You were an officer," she said. It was not a question. Yates felt his jaw tighten. "I was. I saw the medals in the trunk." Griska's expression was unreadable. "They are tarnished." "I do not wear them anymore," Yates said flatly. "I do not need reminders of the war." Griska studied him for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. "I understand." She moved past him back toward the kitchen, and Yates thought that was the end of it. But the next morning, when Yates came in for breakfast, he found the metal box sitting on the kitchen table. The metals inside gleamed, each one carefully polished until it shone. Griska was at the stove, her back to him as she cooked eggs and salt pork. Yates stared at the medals. There were 4 of them. The Border Defense Medal, the Officer's Commission Star, the Wound Badge with 2 clasps, and the King's Service Cross. He had earned them through blood and loss, through watching friends die and making impossible decisions. He had shoved them in that trunk the day he came home and had not wanted to look at them since. "Why did you do this?" he asked quietly. Griska turned to face him, the pan still in her hand. Her green eyes were serious, and when she spoke, her voice was gentle. "Someone should be proud of what you did, even if you are not proud yourself." Yates felt something crack open inside his chest. "I killed orcs," he said harshly. "I led men into battles against your people. I have the blood of your kin on my hands. How can you polish these medals knowing that? You were a soldier," Griska said. "You followed orders. You protected your people. That is what soldiers do." She set down the pan and moved closer, limping slightly though her leg was healing. "I was a warrior. I fought humans. I killed them because my clan told me they were the enemy. I have nightmares about the faces of the men I cut down." Her voice dropped. "But I also know that most of those men were like you. They were protecting their homes, their families. They believed they were doing what was right." "How do you live with it?" Yates asked, and he was horrified to hear his voice crack. "How do you live with what you have done?" Griska reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and placed her hand over his. Her palm was warm and calloused from work. "You live by choosing to be better. You live by showing kindness when you have the chance. You live by refusing to let the war define who you are." She squeezed his hand gently. "And you let someone remind you that the courage and honor you showed still matter, even if the cause was complicated." Yates looked down at their joined hands, green skin and pale skin, former enemies connected across a kitchen table. He should pull away. This was wrong on so many levels. But he could not make himself move. "I do not feel honorable," he admitted quietly. "Honor is not about how you feel," Griska said. "It is about what you do. You opened your home to an enemy who needed help. You asked for nothing in return. That is honor, Yates Thornfield." They stood like that for a long moment, and Yates felt the weight he had been carrying for 3 years lighten just slightly. He would never be proud of the war. He would never stop seeing the faces of the orcs and humans who had died under his command. But maybe Griska was right. Maybe he could choose to be better than his past. "Thank you," he said finally, "for polishing them, for understanding." Griska nodded and stepped back, releasing his hand. "The eggs are getting cold," she said, and Yates was grateful for the return to normalcy. But something had shifted between them. As they ate breakfast in companionable silence, Yates found himself watching Griska more carefully. The way she moved with unconscious grace despite her injuries. The way her tusks showed when she smiled at something Copper did. The way the morning light caught in her dark hair and turned her green skin the color of new leaves. It was dangerous, this awareness. Yates tried to push it down, to focus on his work, on the harvest that needed finishing before the first snow. But he caught himself lingering in the kitchen when Griska was there, finding excuses to work on tasks near wherever she was sitting. If Griska noticed, she did not say anything. Her leg was healing well, and by the end of the first week, she was able to walk without limping. She began taking on more of the household tasks: cooking, cleaning, tending the chickens and the small vegetable garden. Yates had let things slide in the years of living alone, and he was surprised by how much he appreciated coming in to find a hot meal waiting, clean clothes folded on his bed, the floors swept. It felt like having a home again instead of just a place to sleep. 2 weeks after Griska arrived, Yates was in the barn repairing a broken wagon wheel when he heard voices from the yard. He tensed, recognizing one of them Harold Fenwick, his nearest neighbor, and a man with firm opinions about orcs. Yates grabbed his coat and headed outside, his heart pounding. Harold was standing by his horse, talking to Griska. The older man had his hand on his sword hilt, and Griska had positioned herself between Harold and the house, her chin up despite the obvious threat. "What is going on here?" Yates asked, keeping his voice level as he approached. Harold turned to him, his weathered face tight with anger. "Yates, what in the name of the gods are you doing with an orc on your property?" "Griska is helping me with the harvest work," Yates said calmly. "She is my employee." "Your employee?" Harold's voice rose. "She is an orc. They are not to be trusted. She will probably slit your throat the moment you turn your back." "I have been here for 2 weeks," Griska said quietly. "I have had many opportunities to harm Yates. I have not." 2 weeks. Harold looked between them, his expression shifting to something like disgust. "Yates, people are going to talk. An unmarried man and an orc woman living under the same roof. What people think is none of my concern," Yates interrupted. "Griska needed help, I gave it. That is all there is to it." Harold shook his head. "You are making a mistake, boy. Your father would be ashamed." "My father taught me to help those in need," Yates said, his voice hardening. "He taught me to judge people by their actions, not their blood." "So unless you have actual business here, Harold, I would appreciate it if you left." Harold stared at him for a long moment, then spat on the ground. "Fine, but do not come crying to me when this blows up in your face." He mounted his horse and rode off without another word. Yates watched him go, his hands clenched into fists. He knew this would not be the end of it. Harold would talk, and soon the whole valley would know there was an orc living at the Thornfield farm. "I should leave," Griska said quietly. "I am causing you trouble." "No," Yates said firmly. "You are not the problem. Their prejudice is the problem." He turned to face her. "Besides, I was not lying. I do need help with the harvest, and you have been invaluable. Please stay, at least until the first snow." Griska looked at him searchingly. "Why does it matter so much to you? Why risk your reputation for me?" Yates considered his answer. The truth was complicated, a tangle of guilt and loneliness and something else he was not quite ready to name. "Because you deserve better." he said finally. You deserve a chance to build the peaceful life you left your clan to find. And because having you here has made this place feel like a home again, and I am not ready to give that up yet." Griska's expression softened, and for a moment, Yates thought she might cry, but she blinked hard and nodded. "Then I will stay, and I will help you with whatever comes." What came, 3 days later, was more visitors. This time it was a group of 4 men, and Yates recognized the look of bounty hunters when he saw it. He spotted them from the field where he was working and immediately dropped his scythe, running for the house. Griska was in the kitchen, kneading bread dough. She looked up in alarm when Yates burst through the door. "Bounty hunters," he said tersely. "4 of them. Get to the cellar and stay quiet." Griska's eyes widened, but she shook her head. "I will not hide while you face them alone." "Griska, I am tired of running," she said, wiping the flour from her hands. "I will not cower any more." There was no time to argue. The bounty hunters were already riding into the yard. Yates moved to stand beside Griska, his hand on his sword hilt. They walked out together to meet the men. The leader was a scarred brute with a missing ear and cruel eyes. He looked at Griska and smiled, revealing several gold teeth. "There you are, sweetheart. You led us on quite the chase." "I am not going with you," Griska said steadily. "Was not asking," the man said. He turned to Yates. "Step aside, farmer. This does not concern you." "She is under my protection," Yates said. "You are not taking her." The bounty hunter laughed. "Your protection? You and what army?" "I do not need an army," Yates said quietly. "I just need to be willing to kill you, and I am." The man's smile faded. He studied Yates more carefully, taking in the way he stood, the casual grip on his sword. "You are a soldier." "Was," Yates said. "Captain Yates Thornfield, 3rd Border Regiment. I left the army, but I did not forget how to fight." 4 against 1, the bounty hunter pointed out. "Not great odds." 2 against 4, Griska corrected. "And I was a clan warrior. I can promise you that at least 2 of you will die before you take me." The tension stretched out, tight as a bowstring. Yates could see the bounty hunters calculating, trying to decide if the money was worth the risk. Finally, the leader shook his head. "Not worth it," he muttered. He pointed at Griska. "But this is not over. There is a bounty on escaped orcs, and someone will collect it eventually." "Then they will have to go through me," Yates said. "And I promise you I will make it very expensive." The bounty hunters left, but Yates knew they had only bought temporary safety. He turned to Griska, whose face was pale beneath her green skin. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You did not have to do that." "Yes, I did," Yates said. He surprised himself by reaching out and taking her hand. "You are not alone in this, Griska, not anymore." Griska squeezed his hand, and Yates saw tears glistening in her eyes. "I have not had someone stand beside me like that since I left my clan. I had forgotten what it felt like." They stood like that in the yard, hands clasped, and Yates felt the last of his defenses crumbling. He cared about this orc woman. More than cared. The thought should have terrified him, but instead it felt right, like a piece of his life sliding into place. That night, after a quiet dinner, they sat by the fire in the main room. Griska was mending one of Yates's shirts, and he was carving a new handle for his axe. Copper lay between them, snoring softly. "Tell me about your family," Griska said suddenly. "You mentioned your parents, but you never talk about them." Yates set down his carving. "My mother was the heart of this farm. She could make anything grow, could heal any animal, could cook a meal out of nothing and make it taste like a feast. She was kind to everyone, even when they did not deserve it." He smiled at the memory. "My father was quieter. He taught me everything about working the land, about being responsible, about doing what is right even when it is hard. They were happy together. You could see it in the way they looked at each other, even after 30 years of marriage." "You miss them," Griska said gently. Every day, Yates admitted. When I came back from the war, I thought having the farm would make me feel close to them again, but it just reminded me that they were gone. It felt empty. And now? Griska asked. Yates looked at her, sitting in his mother's chair, firelight playing across her green skin. Now it feels less empty. Griska set down her mending, her expression serious. Yates, what are we doing? Whatever this is between us, it is not something either of our peoples will accept. I know, Yates said. He had been thinking about this for days, and he knew it was time to be honest. But I cannot stop myself from caring about you, Griska. I tried. I know all the reasons it is a bad idea. But when I think about you leaving, when I think about going back to being alone here, he stopped, searching for the right words. You make me want to live again, not just exist. Griska stood and crossed to his chair, kneeling in front of him so they were eye to eye. I care for you too, she said softly. More than is wise. You are the first person in a very long time who has treated me like I matter, not as a warrior or an orc or a problem to be solved, but just as myself. I do not want to leave, but I do not want to bring you more trouble than I already have. Yates reached out and cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing over her cheekbone. You are not trouble. You are the best thing that has happened to me since I came home from that damned war. Griska leaned into his touch, her eyes falling closed. This will not be easy. Nothing worth having ever is, Yates said. Griska opened her eyes and smiled, her tusks showing. Then we face it together, Yates agreed. She leaned forward and kissed him, tentative at first and then deeper. Yates pulled her closer and she came willingly, her strong arms wrapping around him. She tasted like the peppermint tea she had been drinking, and her skin was warm beneath his hands. When they finally broke apart, both of them breathing hard, Griska rested her forehead against his. I have never done this before, she admitted. Orcs do not usually kiss like humans do, Yates smiled. We can take things slow, figure it out together. I would like that, Griska said. They stayed by the fire for a long time, talking and sometimes not talking, just being together. When they finally went to their separate beds, Yates lay awake for a long time, his mind spinning. He had not felt this way about anyone since before the war, and even then, it had been nothing like this. What he felt for Griska was deeper, richer, more real. The next morning, Yates woke to find Griska already up and making breakfast. She smiled when she saw him, a private, warm smile that made his heart skip. They ate together, trading small touches, a hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing as they passed the bread, and Yates felt absurdly happy. But their peace was short-lived. That afternoon, a group of villagers arrived, led by Harold Fenwick and accompanied by the local magistrate, a pompous man named Gregory Stone. Yates and Griska met them in the yard. Yates counted 8 villagers, all armed, all looking grim. Yates Thornfield, Gregory Stone said formally. We have received reports that you are harboring an orc on your property in violation of the settlement laws. I am here to verify these claims. Griska is my employee, Yates said. She has broken no laws. The settlement laws clearly state that orcs are not permitted to reside within human territories, except as registered laborers in designated camps, Stone recited. She must either be turned over to the labor camps or removed from the territory. Those laws are unjust, Yates said flatly. Griska is a person, not property. She has as much right to be here as anyone. The law is the law, Stone said. If you do not comply, I will have no choice but to call for the militia. Yates felt Griska tense beside him. He knew she was preparing to run, to disappear rather than cause him more trouble. He reached out and took her hand, holding it tightly. Then call the militia, Yates said, because I am not handing her over. The villagers muttered among themselves, and Stone looked uncomfortable. Yates, be reasonable. This orc, her name is Griska, Yates interrupted, and she is worth 10 of you. Harold Fenwick stepped forward, his face red with anger. We have tried to be patient with you, Yates, out of respect for your father's memory, but this is too much. You are bringing shame on this community. The only shame here is your prejudice, Yates shot back. Griska has done nothing but work hard and mind her own business. The only crime she has committed is being born an orc. She is one of them, another villager shouted. They killed my son in the war. And humans killed my brother and father, Griska said quietly. Does that give me the right to hate all of you? The villager fell silent, looking uncomfortable. Stone sighed. Yates, I do not want to do this, but you are forcing my hand. You have 3 days to remove the orc from your property, or I will return with the militia and remove her by force. That is my final word. He turned his horse and rode away. The other villagers following, Harold lingered for a moment. You are making a mistake, boy. A mistake you will regret. Then he too left. Yates turned to Griska, who looked shaken but determined. I am sorry, she said. I should leave before this gets worse. No, Yates said firmly. I meant what I said. I am not giving you up. Yates, they will bring the militia. You could be arrested, lose your farm. I do not care, Yates said. Griska, I love you. The words hung in the air between them. Griska stared at him, her eyes wide with shock. You love me, she whispered. Yes, Yates said. I know it is fast, I know it is complicated, but I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your stubborn pride. I love the way you hum while you work and the way you talk to the chickens like they are your friends. I love that you polished my medals because you thought someone should be proud. I love you, Griska, and I am not letting anyone take you away. Griska let out a choked laugh that might have been half a sob. I love you too, you stubborn human. I have been trying not to, but I do. I love how gentle you are despite being a warrior. I love how you treat me like I am precious. I love your quiet strength and your kind heart. She grabbed his shirt and pulled him down into a fierce kiss. When she released him, she was smiling through tears. So what do? Yates thought quickly. We run, together. There are places in the South where the laws are more relaxed, where mixed communities exist. We can start over there. You would leave your home for me, Griska asked. This farm is just land, Yates said. You are home. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Yates packed his most essential belongings, sold what livestock he could to a farmer in the next valley who asked no questions, and loaded up his wagon. Griska gathered supplies for the journey: food, blankets, tools. They worked side by side, and despite the urgency, Yates felt a strange peace. He was choosing his own path for the first time since the war ended. On the evening of the second day, as they were making final preparations, Copper began barking frantically. Yates rushed outside to see a lone rider approaching. He relaxed slightly when he recognized the figure Lieutenant Marcus Young, who had served under him during the war. Marcus dismounted and clasped Yates's hand warmly. Captain, it has been too long. Marcus, what brings you here? Marcus glanced at Griska, who had emerged from the house, then back at Yates. I heard about your situation. Word travels fast in the valley. I came to warn you. Stone is gathering the militia early. They are planning to come tomorrow at dawn. Yates cursed. We are not ready. We need another day at least. Then you need to leave tonight, Marcus said. He pulled a pouch from his saddlebag and pressed it into Yates's hands. It clinked with the sound of coins. This is from some of the men from your old unit. When we heard what you were doing, that you were standing up for what is right even when it cost you everything, well, we wanted to help. It is not much, but it should get you started wherever you are going. Yates felt his throat tighten. Marcus, you do not have to. You saved my life more than once during the war, Marcus said firmly. This is nothing. Besides, some of us have started to question the way we treat orcs. The war is over. Maybe it is time we started acting like it." He looked at Griska. "Take care of him." "He is a good man." "I know," Griska said softly. "I will." Marcus mounted his horse. "There is a safe house in Milford about 3 days south. Ask for Janet Fielding at the general store. She helps people like you." He tipped his hat. "Good luck, Captain." As Marcus rode away, Yates opened the pouch. There was easily enough money to get them south and start fresh. He felt a surge of gratitude for his old comrades. "We should go now," Griska said, "while we have the cover of darkness." Yates nodded. They finished loading the wagon quickly, and Yates took one last look at the farmhouse where he had been born, where his parents had lived and loved and died. He felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of freedom. He was no longer chained to the past. They set out under the stars, Copper trotting alongside the wagon. Griska sat beside Yates on the driver's bench, her hand in his. Neither of them spoke much during that first night of travel. There was too much uncertainty ahead, too many dangers they might face. But as the sun rose on their first morning as fugitives, Yates looked at Griska beside him, her green skin golden in the dawn light, her expression determined and hopeful, and he knew he had made the right choice. They traveled for 5 days, moving carefully and avoiding main roads. Marcus's directions proved accurate and they found Milford without incident. Janet Fielding was a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a kind smile. She looked Yates and Griska over carefully when they introduced themselves in her store. "Marcus sent you?" she asked. "He did," Yates confirmed. Janet nodded slowly. "Follow me." She led them through the back of the store to a small house behind it. Inside, she poured them tea and sat down across from them at her kitchen table. "I help people who are fleeing prejudice and unjust laws," she said bluntly. "Mixed couples, mostly. Human and orc, human and dwarf, elf and orc does not matter to me. Everyone deserves a chance at happiness." She looked between them. "But I need to know you are serious about this. The road ahead will not be easy. You will face discrimination, possibly violence. Some towns will not let you enter. Some people will treat you like criminals." "We know," Yates said, "but we are committed." Janet turned to Griska. "And you are giving up any chance of returning to your clan. You will be an outcast among both your people and his." "I left my clan to find a different life," Griska said steadily. "I found it with Yates. I am not going back." Janet smiled. "Good. Then here is what I can offer you. There is a settlement about 2 weeks south of here called Greenhollow. It is a mixed community, humans, orcs, dwarves, even a few elves. They welcome anyone who is willing to work hard and respect their neighbors. I can give you a letter of introduction to the town council. They will help you get established." "Why would they help us?" Yates asked. "Because most of them are people like you, refugees from prejudice and hate. They built Greenhollow to be a place where anyone could belong." Janet stood and moved to a desk, pulling out paper and ink. "I will write the letter now. You can rest here tonight and resupply before you continue south." That night, as Yates and Griska lay together in the small guest room Janet provided, Griska traced patterns on Yates's chest. "Are you afraid?" she asked quietly. "A little," Yates admitted. "But I am also hopeful. For the first time in years, I am looking forward instead of back." Griska kissed his shoulder. "I never imagined I would find this. Someone who sees past what I am to who I am. Someone who would give up everything for me." "You did the same," Yates pointed out. "You left everything you knew to find a better way. That takes more courage than anything I have done." They held each other in the darkness, drawing strength from their shared warmth. The next morning they said goodbye to Janet and continued their journey south. The road to Greenhollow took them through beautiful country rolling hills covered in autumn colors, clear streams and dense forests. They saw few other travelers, and those they did encounter mostly ignored them. Once, they passed a group of orc traders who nodded respectfully to Griska. Another time, they shared a campsite with a dwarf family who were also heading to Greenhollow. As they traveled, Yates and Griska talked about their hopes for the future. They wanted to find land where they could farm, to build a home together, maybe eventually have children. It all seemed impossible and wonderful at the same time. Finally, on a crisp autumn morning, they crested a hill and saw Greenhollow spread out below them. It was larger than Yates had expected, a proper town with several dozen buildings, cultivated fields, orchards, and even what looked like a small marketplace. And it was clearly mixed. Yates could see orcs, humans, and other races moving about their business, working side by side. They made their way down into the town and asked directions to the council hall. The building was modest but well-maintained, and inside they found 3 council members: a gray-haired human woman, a scarred orc man, and a dwarf with an impressive beard. Yates presented Janet's letter. The human woman, who introduced herself as Counselor Sarah, read it carefully and then smiled. "Welcome to Greenhollow," she said warmly. "We are always happy to welcome new members to our community. Janet speaks highly of you both." Over the next hour, the council explained how Greenhollow worked. Land was allocated based on need and ability to work it. Everyone contributed to the common defense and shared resources. There were rules about respecting all races and cultures, and conflicts were settled by the council rather than through violence. "We have a farm that recently became available," the orc counselor, whose name was Thrak, told them. The previous owners moved on to help start another settlement further south. It is about 20 acres with a house and barn already built. The land is good. If you are interested, we can show it to you. Yates and Griska exchanged glances, both of them hardly daring to hope. "We are very interested," Yates said. The farm was perfect. The house was smaller than Yates's family home had been, but it was sturdy and well built. The barn needed some repairs, but nothing major. The fields were ready for winter wheat, and there was even an orchard with apple and pear trees. "What do you think?" Yates asked Griska as they stood in the doorway of what could be their home. "I think it is perfect," Griska said, her voice thick with emotion. "I think we could be happy here." They accepted the farm that same day. The council helped them unload their wagon, and neighbors appeared with gifts of food, firewood, and other necessities. An older orc woman named Mara brought over a pot of stew and some bread. "Welcome," she said to Griska in the orc language. Yates did not understand the words, but he saw Griska's eyes fill with tears. "She said she is glad I found my way here," Griska translated. "She said Greenhollow is a place where the heart matters more than the color of your skin." That night in their new home, Yates and Griska made love for the first time. It was tender and awkward and absolutely perfect. Afterward, they lay tangled together in bed, the moonlight streaming through the window. "I cannot believe this is real," Griska murmured. "I keep thinking I will wake up and find it was all a dream." "It is real," Yates assured her. "We made it. We are home." The weeks that followed were busy ones. They planted winter wheat and prepared the farm for the cold months ahead. Their neighbors helped with the work, and Yates and Griska helped them in return. Slowly, they began to feel like part of the community. Yates found himself healing in ways he had not expected. Working alongside orc farmers, sharing meals with mixed families, seeing children of different races playing together, it all helped ease the guilt he had carried since the war. He began to understand that the war had not been about orc versus human. It had been about fear and misunderstanding on both sides. Griska blossomed in Greenhollow. She made friends among the orc women, who taught her traditional crafts she had never learned as a warrior. She also grew close to some of the human families, particularly one couple who had a young daughter. Watching Griska play with the little girl, making her laugh with silly faces and stories, Yates could picture the family they might have someday. As winter approached, Yates made a decision. One evening after dinner, he asked Griska to come outside with him. The first snow of the season was falling, soft white flakes drifting down from the dark sky. "What is this about?" Griska asked, laughing as a snowflake landed on her nose. Yates took her hands in his. "Griska, these past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You are my partner, my love, my home. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He dropped to one knee, pulling a simple silver ring from his pocket. He had made it himself, working on it in secret over the past weeks. "Will you marry me?" Griska gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Tears streamed down her green cheeks. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, of course, yes." Yates slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. She kissed him fiercely, both of them laughing and crying at the same time. "I love you so much," Griska said. "I never thought I would have this. A home, a partner, a future. We will build it together," Yates promised. They decided to have a simple wedding in the spring when the weather was warmer, but they did not wait to announce their engagement. The news spread quickly through Greenhollow, and their neighbors were genuinely happy for them. Several people offered to help with the wedding preparations. Winter settled in, and Yates and Griska spent the cold months working on improving their home. They added shelves to the kitchen, repaired the barn roof, and planned their crops for spring. In the evenings, they sat by the fire, talking or reading or simply enjoying each other's company. One night in deep winter, Yates pulled out his war medals. He had brought them with him, unable to leave them behind entirely. Griska watched as he set them on the table, the polished metal gleaming in the firelight. "You still struggle with what you did in the war?" she asked gently. "Sometimes," Yates admitted, "but less than before. Being here, seeing humans and orcs living together peacefully, it helps. It shows me that the war was not inevitable. We chose it, and we can choose differently now." Griska picked up one of the medals, turning it over in her hands. "I think you should wear these at our wedding." Yates looked at her in surprise. "Why?" "Because they are part of your story," Griska said. "The war brought you pain, yes, but it also shaped who you are. It taught you courage and honor. And in a way, it brought us together, because if you had not fought, if you had not learned what you learned, you might not have opened your door to an injured orc woman looking for help." She set the medal back down gently. "You do not have to be ashamed of your service, Yates. You should be proud of how you served and even prouder of the man you became after." Yates felt emotion swelling in his chest. "When did you become so wise?" Griska smiled. "I have a good teacher." As winter gave way to spring, preparations for the wedding intensified. The whole community got involved. The dwarf baker made a special cake. The human seamstresses helped Griska make a beautiful dress in a style that blended human and orc traditions. Thrak offered to perform the ceremony, as he was licensed by the council to officiate weddings. The night before the wedding, Yates and Griska followed tradition and spent the night apart. Yates stayed with a neighboring family while Griska remained at their home with Mara and the other orc women. The next morning dawned clear and beautiful. Spring flowers were blooming everywhere, and the air smelled of fresh grass and new beginnings. Yates dressed carefully, putting on his best clothes, and then, following Griska's suggestion, he pinned his war medals to his chest. Looking at himself in the mirror, Yates felt different. The medals no longer represented just pain and loss. They represented survival and growth, and the long journey that had brought him to this moment. Griska was right, he did not have to be ashamed of his service. He could be proud of how he had tried to lead with honor. even in impossible circumstances, and how he had chosen peace when he came home. The wedding was held in the town square, with the entire community gathered. Yates stood under an arch decorated with flowers, his heart pounding as he waited for Griska to appear. When she did, his breath caught. Her dress was deep green, embroidered with silver thread in orc patterns. Her dark hair was loose around her shoulders, woven with small white flowers. She was absolutely beautiful. Griska walked toward him with her head held high, and when she reached him, she took his hands in hers. They spoke their vows in front of the assembled community, promising to love and support each other, to face whatever challenges came together, to build a life based on mutual respect and partnership. When Thrak pronounced them married, the crowd erupted in cheers. Yates pulled Griska close and kissed her, and she kissed him back with all the joy and love in her heart. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was music and dancing, food and drink, laughter and joy. At one point, Marcus appeared he had traveled down from the north to attend the wedding, bringing more gifts from Yates's old unit. "I am happy for you, Captain," Marcus said, clasping Yates's hand. "You deserve this." "Thank you for everything you did to help us," Yates said. "We would not be here without you," Marcus smiled. "Just doing what was right, same as you taught us." As the evening wore on, Yates found himself standing at the edge of the celebration, watching Griska dance with a group of women, both human and orc. She was laughing, her face alight with happiness, and Yates felt his heart swell with love for her. He thought about the journey that had brought them here, from that first desperate morning when an injured orc woman had appeared at his door, through the threats and the fear and the flight from his home, to this moment of pure joy. It had not been easy. But every hard moment had been worth it to arrive here. Sarah, the human counselor, came to stand beside him. "You have a good woman there," she said. "I know," Yates said. "I am lucky." "She is lucky too," Sarah said. "Not many men would have done what you did. Standing up to your whole community, giving up your home, that took real courage." "It did not feel like courage," Yates admitted. "It felt like the only choice I could live with," Sarah nodded. "That is what real courage is, doing what is right even when it costs you." She gestured to the medals on his chest. "I see you wore your service medals." "My wife insisted," Yates said, smiling at the words "my wife." "She said someone should be proud of them." "She is a smart woman," Sarah said. "We need more people like you, two people willing to bridge the divides between our peoples, to show that we are more alike than different." As Sarah walked away, Griska came over and slipped her hand into Yates's. "What are you doing over here all alone, husband?" The words sent a thrill through him. "Just thinking about how lucky I am." "We both are," Griska said. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I never imagined I could be this happy." They stood together, watching their friends and neighbors celebrate, and Yates felt a deep sense of peace. The war was behind him. The medals on his chest were a reminder of what he had survived, not what defined him. And the future stretched ahead, full of possibility. In the months that followed, Yates and Griska settled into married life. They worked their farm together, planting and harvesting, tending their animals, improving their home bit by bit. They became pillars of the Green Hollow community, always ready to help a neighbor in need. Summer came, hot and golden. Griska taught Yates some of the orc language, and he taught her some of the old soldiers' songs from his regiment. They swam together in the creek on hot afternoons and worked side by side in the fields. One evening in late summer, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Griska placed Yates's hand on her stomach. "There is something I need to tell you," she said, her eyes shining. "I am pregnant." Yates stared at her, trying to process the words. "Pregnant? We are going to have a baby." Griska nodded, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Yes, in the spring. Are you happy?" Yates pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Happy does not begin to cover it. I am overwhelmed. I am terrified. I am more grateful than I have words for." They held each other as the sun set, both of them crying happy tears. A baby. A child who would be both human and orc, a living symbol of the love they shared and the bridges they were building between their peoples. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. The community rallied around them, offering advice and support. Mara, who had raised 7 children of her own, became a constant presence, helping Griska prepare for motherhood. Yates threw himself into making their home perfect for the baby. He built a cradle from oak wood, carving it with intricate designs. He reinforced the house against drafts and made sure they had plenty of firewood stocked for the winter. As Griska's belly grew, Yates found himself filled with a fierce protectiveness. He wanted to give this child everything: safety, love, a world where they would be accepted for who they were. Winter came again, and Griska grew larger and more uncomfortable. But she never complained, just smiled whenever Yates fussed over her and reminded him that orc women were strong. In early spring, as the first flowers began to bloom, Griska went into labor. Mara and the town midwife attended her while Yates paced outside, nearly frantic with worry. The labor was long and difficult, and more than once Yates wanted to burst into the room, but Mara firmly kept him out. Finally, as the sun was setting, he heard it, the strong, healthy cry of a newborn baby. Mara emerged, grinning. "You have a son, and your wife is well. Come meet him." Yates rushed into the bedroom. Griska was propped up against pillows, looking exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle. Yates approached slowly, hardly daring to breathe. The baby had green-tinged skin, somewhere between Yates's pale tone and Griska's deep forest green. He had a shock of dark hair, and when he opened his mouth to cry again, Yates could see 2 tiny nubs that would someday be tusks. He was perfect. "Here is your son," Griska said softly, placing the baby in Yates's arms. Yates looked down at the tiny face and felt his world shift. All the pain he had endured, all the struggles and sacrifices, they all led to this moment. This child was hope made flesh, proof that love could triumph over hate. "What should we name him?" Yates asked. Griska thought for a moment. "Eamon," she said. "It is a name that works in both our languages." "It means guardian." "Eamon," Yates repeated. "It is perfect." Little Eamon grew quickly, a happy and healthy baby. He had his mother's strength and his father's curiosity. The community adored him, and he was passed from one set of loving arms to another whenever Yates and Griska brought him to town. As Eamon learned to crawl and then walk, Yates and Griska marveled at every milestone. He spoke his first words in a mix of human common and orc tongue. He played equally with human and orc children, seeing no difference between them. Watching his son grow up in Greenhollow, Yates felt a profound gratitude for the world they had helped build. Eamon would never know the prejudice that had nearly kept his parents apart. He would grow up knowing that love transcended race and that family was about more than blood. One afternoon, when Eamon was about 3 years old, Yates was working in the barn when the boy toddled in, followed by Griska. "Papa," Eamon said in his high, sweet voice, "what are those shiny things?" Yates followed his son's pointing finger and saw that Eamon had found the metal box, which Yates kept on a high shelf in the barn. Griska lifted Eamon up so he could see better. Yates opened the box and showed Eamon the medals. "These are from when I was a soldier, before you were born." "You fought in the war," Eamon said matter-of-factly. He had heard the story before, simplified for a child's understanding. "I did," Yates said. "Were you scared?" Eamon asked. "Sometimes," Yates admitted, "but I did my duty and tried to protect people." Eamon reached out and touched one of the medals with a chubby finger. "You are brave, Papa." Yates looked up and met Griska's eyes over their son's head. She was smiling, and Yates knew she was remembering the day she had polished those medals, the day she had told him someone should be proud. "Thank you, son," Yates said softly. "But the bravest thing I ever did was not in the war. It was opening the door when your mother needed help." Griska set Eamon down, and the boy ran off to play with Copper, who had grown old and gentle but still adored the little boy. Griska moved to stand beside Yates. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Giving up your old life?" Yates looked around the barn at the sturdy walls he had helped repair, at the sound of his son's laughter drifting in from outside, at his wife's beautiful green face. "Not for a single moment," he said. "This is everything I never knew I needed." Griska kissed him gently. "Me too." Years passed. Eamon grew into a bright, kind boy who loved both his human and orc heritage. Yates and Griska added 2 more children to their family, a daughter named Sierra, and another son they called Finn. Their farm prospered, and they became respected elders in the Green Hollow community. Yates never forgot his past, but he no longer lived in it. The war medals stayed in their box, occasionally brought out to show the children, or when old soldiers like Marcus came to visit. They were a reminder of where he had been, but not who he was. Who he was a farmer, a husband, a father. He was a man who had chosen love over fear, who had built bridges instead of walls. And every morning when he woke up beside Griska, every evening when they gathered their children for dinner, he was grateful for the choices that had brought him here. On a warm summer evening, when Eamon was 12, Sierra was 9, and Finn was 6, the family sat together on their porch watching the fireflies dance in the gathering darkness. The children were arguing cheerfully about something inconsequential, and Griska was laughing at their antics. Yates felt Griska's hand slip into his, and he squeezed it gently. She looked at him and smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart all those years ago when she was just an injured stranger at his door. "Happy?" she asked softly. "More than I ever dreamed possible," Yates replied. And it was true. The man who had come home from war, broken and alone, carrying medals he was too ashamed to wear, that man was gone. In his place was someone whole, someone who understood that true honor was not won on battlefields but in the quiet moments of choosing kindness, of standing up for what was right, of loving without reservation. The orc woman who had polished those medals and said someone should be proud had not just restored their shine. She had restored Yates himself, had shown him that he was worthy of love and pride, that his past did not have to define his future. Together, they had built something beautiful, a family, a home, a life full of love and purpose. And as the stars came out above Green Hollow and their children's voices rose in laughter, Yates knew that this was what he had been fighting for all along, even when he had not known it. This was peace. This was home. This was love, and it was everything